Now, what happens to the paraxial mesoderm? How does it form the muscles, skeletal muscles of the body? Okay, the proliferation of the paraxial mesoderm, it causes this ectoderm to fold and form the neural groove over here, which eventually forms the neural tube over here. Okay, once the neural groove forms the neural tube, okay, let me erase out this part. Now, what happens next to the this paraxial mesoderm? Well, the paraxial mesoderm at this cephalic region or at the head region of the embryo, what it does is it actually divides itself into organized segments. Okay, it organizes itself. The paraxial mesoderm organizes itself into segments, which are known as the somatomeres at the head region of the embryo. Okay, basically 7 somatomeres are made in the head region of the embryo. What happens, these somatomeres, they actually then further they form the head musculature of the embryo, or the musculature of the head musculature of the embryo is made from these 7 organized segments of the paraxial mesoderm. Okay, 7 organized segments of the paraxial mesoderm uh, form the head musculature of the embryo. And I've taken a few more diagrams from the same book, Langman, and let's look at them. So these are very good diagrams, and they'll help us understand the concept. Now, this is the midline of the embryo. Okay, this is a 22-day-old embryo, and right next to the midline we have the paraxial mesoderm. This paraxial mesoderm, it has started organizing itself into segments or into blocks. Can you see the blocks over here? These blocks, when they are present in the head region, they are called the somatomeres. Okay, over here in the head region of the embryo, and 7 somatomeres are present till the occipital region of the embryo. Okay, there are 7 somatomeres, and these 7 somatomeres, they form the head musculature of the embryo. Now, as we go from the cranial axis to on the cranial caudal axis, from the cephalic end towards the caudal end or towards the tail end, what happens is that these, after we reach the occipital end, immediately after the occipital end, after this end, the paraxial mesoderm, it further organizes itself. Okay, it further organizes. If you look at this diagram over here, let me make it a bit. Okay, I'm erasing out this stuff now. Okay, so if you look at this diagram over here, let me zoom in a bit then. Okay, so near the head region over here, you will have this first 7 somatomeres, and then when you reach the occipital lobe or the occipital region, the occipital region is reached, the somatomeres end. Okay, no more somatomeres will be found. After the occipital region, the paraxial mesoderm, it divides itself further and organizes itself further into even more organized segments. These segments are now not called somatomeres, but rather they are called only somites. So what are somites? Somites are actually the organized segments of the paraxial mesoderm. Okay, they are the organized segments of the paraxial mesoderm on both the sides of the midline. Okay, and by the way, let me tell you an interesting fact that in the head region you find somatomeres, and that's the only region, the only place where you can find the somatomeres. But in addition to somatomeres, you will also find some somites in the head region. Okay, because somites are, what I just told you, they are the more organized form of the somatomeres. But as you go down and as you cross the occipital region and as you go towards the tail end of the embryo, you will only find somites and you will not find any somatomeres. Okay, this is an important fact to remember. And by the way, these somites, the number of somites present in the embryo can be used to determine the age of the embryo. Okay, age of the embryo. That's how the embryologists they determine the age of the embryo, by just counting the somites in the embryo. Okay, so the somites have a very high clinical importance. And by the way, these somites, they are the one responsible for formation of the musculature of the skeletal muscles, actually, of the body wall, of the limbs, of the exoskeleton, and all the basically the majority of the voluntary skeletal muscles are made from the somites, and the somatomeres, they are responsible for the head musculature. And remember, both of them are actually organized segments of the paraxial mesoderm. Okay, so we've talked about this part. Now, this photo was also present in your same book, Langman, and I found it a bit interesting. So let's look at it. Now, this is the neural tube. Okay, and right next to the neural tube, this part and this part, what do you guys expect this to be? This was actually your paraxial mesoderm, which has now differentiated or organized, not differentiated, it has rather organized into the somites. Okay, and then right next to the paraxial mesoderm, what sort of mesoderm will you find? It's the intermediate mesoderm that you're supposed to find, okay, on both the sides. And right adjacent to the intermediate mesoderm, which one is this one? This mesoderm over here, I've made the double boundary. Okay, why have I made the double boundary? Well, actually, that's because this part, okay, let me change the color. This region over here, this is a cavity. This region over here is a cavity. Okay, this is the intra embryonic cavity, or intra-embryonic cavity, or intra-embryonic coelom. Remember, when uh, the lateral plate mesoderm, it divided into uh, the parietal mesoderm and the splanchnic mesoderm. So a cavity formed in between them. Okay, so that's the cavity which is present over here. Okay, and by the way, the labelings are not that clear, but this labeling is, I think, going on to one layer, and this labeling is going on to the other layer. Okay, because the picture is black and white, so the labeling might not be that clear, but this is what the labeling actually tells us. Okay, and there is this intraembryonic cavity over here. Okay, one layer is going and covering the, if this is a if the this upper layer is the parietal layer, then what cavity is it supposed to cover, or supposed to surround? Parietal layer surrounds the amniotic cavity. We've talked about this. And what part, sorry, what cavity does the visceral layer surround, or the splanchnic layer surround? It surrounds the yolk sac of the embryo, right? So this pretty much completes this discussion over here. Yeah, it completes. Actually, I've shown you all the diagrams. Let me zoom out a bit, just see if I've, okay, yeah, this finishes off this discussion of the intro. This was just an introductory discussion of muscle development. In the next lecture, which I'll try to give the link in the description, we are gonna talk about the further differentiation of these somites, okay, and how they form the muscles of the embryo, the muscles of the body wall of the embryo, etc., etc. Okay, and thank you so much. Take care.